Hello, listeners. Before we get started today, I want to let you know about a hilarious and slightly educational podcast out there. The name of this show is 10ish Podcast. That is 10ish Podcast. Hosts Nick and Brandon cover a new top 10 list each and every week. Each episode, either Nick or Brandon present a top 10 list, and the other person has no idea what they're about to hear. If the person is not presenting, then their job is to guess the items on the top 10 list of the week. Nick and Brandon are certainly jumping into the spooktacular nature of October, getting themselves ready for Halloween. This week's episode was about the most Google searched monsters. Last week, the most popular Halloween costumes of 2017. The week before that, most prolific serial killers. If you're like me, you're always looking for a couple extra podcasts, so I highly recommend it. You gotta check it out. Let's get ready. Hello everyone, and welcome to the More You NoCo, Northern Colorado's homegrown podcast about the people and ideas around the area. I'm your host, Ivan Wayne, and today we'll be hearing from Chris Garcia, the Community Engagement Specialist for the City of Greeley. What in the world does a Community Engagement Specialist do? I had the same question before I got the opportunity to meet and sit down with Chris. As a pro connections maker in the City of Greeley, Chris has a story and a job that you're just going to have to hear for yourself out there, listener. And putting it like that, I'm not going to delay us anymore. Let's get to it. Okay, hello.
Hi.
I sit here with Chris Garcia, the Community Engagement Specialist for the City of Greeley. Yes. How you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Thank you for joining us here on a crisp Monday afternoon.
Yeah, it's beautiful outside.
In October. When I first met you, you told me that you had just started a new position in Greeley, and that is the Community Engagement Specialist. So, what does that entail?
Much of the work that I do has to do with either informing or providing access to or connecting people to resources, opportunities, engagement with the city, as well as getting them excited about upcoming events, priorities, and really connecting with them in various different ways. I also do translations to Spanish, porque soy bilingüe. It's just a really great opportunity to connect with another 40% of the Greeley population.
So how'd you find out about this role, or how'd you step into this?
Well, it was really cool because I actually co-founded an organization called the Latinx Professional Network here in Greeley. And the person that I co-founded the organization with used to be in this role. Her name is Maribel Talamantes. And Maribel was telling me about how she was going on to other opportunities and shared that I should potentially apply.
You're trying to engage community. You're making connections. Where does one start?
As a resident or myself, how do I start?
This seems like a job with no roadmap for it. And you just have to come in and do it. You know, like day one, where did you start? Did you have to make a list of priorities? Were there some kind of sort of city initiatives that were saying, hey, Chris, here's kind of the 3 things we want to work on, or...
Yeah, I actually I came in with a list of priorities. I met with Becky Safrick, who is the assistant city manager for the city, and my current supervisor, Amy Freeland, and we met specifically to talk about, you know, where can I take this? Because like you said, there's so many ways that you can take this, and a lot of it has to do with community activation around specific priorities, which include volunteerism on our boards and commissions. It also includes connecting to resources, whether those are free resources or opportunities for folks to kind of better their homes through urban renewal development grants or some loans that happen through there, or also just through activation around what's coming up in their neighborhoods, right? So is a park being updated? Are there public services that are being updated in your areas? Is there going to be street construction? How do we get in front of those kinds of things so that the neighbors know what's going to be happening and then can also provide input? I mean, one of the big things that is coming up is the 2020 census. And the 2020 census is going to be one of the big things that we think about as we move forward, because through the census, there are many opportunities for the city to apply for federal grants, to support our residents, and also to see, where do we need additional services? Like, where are we missing an urgent care facility, or, where do we need another school, or where do we need things to, where do we need improvements, or where do we need additional housing? All of those things can be found through like really seeing who our residents are and how our population has grown.
Yeah, working with the 2020 census, is your department going to be involved in getting more people to take it, or just after the census info has been received?
Both. Really kind of figuring out afterwards, like, where has our population changed? What are our new demographics? All of those kinds of things. But beforehand, getting people excited about it. Like, the census is not a super exciting thing, and it's not something that people are excited to fill out, or at least not most people. I was kind of excited to fill it out when I filled it out when I was in 2010.
Nerd alert.
Right? But I was like, this is cool. Like, I finally have my own apartment. I can fill this out for myself. But really getting people, whether those are students who are on campus or underserved populations or any of our general citizenry or residents, to really kind of realize how important it is for everybody to fill it out, and also for them to fill it out like accurately, right?
And how do you stress that to people? How do you get that message out there?
So we're still learning, and actually we're going to have our first meeting with the census this week. Actually, I think it's tomorrow evening. We're going to meet with representatives from the census to talk about what are they doing federally, what are they doing in the nationally, and how can we bring those types of resources and opportunities here to Greeley. But I think the biggest thing is if you're not counted, you don't count. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of information out there. I can probably say that better. I'm thinking about it in Spanish. Si no nos cuentan, no contamos. If people don't see our population has changed, if they don't see, if the city isn't able to see where we need to put additional resources because we have a greater population there, or a changing population there, or et cetera, then the city doesn't know what it should be doing, right? If we don't have the right information, then we're not going to be able to apply for federal grants that we can potentially utilize to serve our residents better. If we don't have the right information, or if people aren't counted, then we could be losing out on, House of Representative seats, because Colorado actually gained an additional seat in 2010 after the population growth at that point. And I mean, we've seen how Colorado continues to grow. So all of that information is important, and it shows why it is so vital for us to fill it out accurately.
I'm sitting here now realizing that the census is more important than I thought. And I'm just thinking, how do you get people to internalize the importance at the individual level? We see the group benefits, but to take the time and fill this out, and it's a mail-in, right? So people would mail it back in, or
sometimes people come to your door and ask you to fill it out that way as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I imagine with Colorado's growth, we might be due for another seat. I mean, look at the amount of people moving to Colorado.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it's a really exciting time to be in northern Colorado specifically. I mean, Greeley being seen as this economic power, Fort Collins as well. It's no longer separate cities, right? It's like northern Colorado is being seen as this like really exciting place to come and live, and at the same time becoming economic powerhouse, right? Like, I think Greeley was number one in job growth through a recent poll. It had the biggest growth economically. It has, I think it was like the number one fastest growing city in 2016. So there are various polls that show that like people are excited about this place. With that information in mind, like, them being counted as part of this is also important for the city to know, where do we go next?
Yeah, and that community-wide, city bridging mentality and concept of Northern Colorado, NoCo, that's part of what makes this podcast possible. Yeah, do you know anything about the stats of Greeley's growth? I feel like this conversation has kind of organically come up a couple of times on the show, but also just with my friends recently, that I didn't realize Greeley was growing that fast compared to other places here.
I don't want to like perjure myself and say like wrong numbers, but I know that it's growing very, very quickly. Like I said, there's a few studies that you can look at that show specifically how Greeley was like the number one in growth in like 2016 in population. There's one that recently, I think it was Wallet Hub, who recently spoke to Greeley's economic growth and being the number one in job growth in the entire United States. the idea of Greeley's agricultural economy and how it's, I believe, in the top 10 in our nation, being where it is, right? And like many of the others are in like California or Texas because they get year-round rain, where we don't. So it's an important place, and it's a vital community toward the growth of the United States.
Yeah, and Greeley's such a interesting place. It's a neat place. I feel like on a Friday night, depending on which block you're hanging out on, anywhere in Greeley, specifically downtown, it's like you're going to have a completely different experience.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's super neat about this town.
I agree, and I think that like even outside of downtown, right? Like there's so many spaces and pockets and places where you get to meet like such different and interesting people. I spend a lot of time on the east side as well, which a lot of people don't even know the east side of Greeley exists, right? Like you have to cross Highway 34 to see that entire area. But I have family that lives there, and so like that's an entire sense of community there as well.
So I'm going to jump through some stuff you mentioned earlier. You mentioned this idea of lead through volunteerism. So what does that include?
So for me, the idea of leading through volunteerism is an opportunity to share your voice, to share your insight, to really be a leader in your community by providing service. The big thing is about like, we have these boards and commissions, we have volunteer opportunities all through the city, and at the same time, like they're not really being taken advantage of as much as they possibly could. And what's really cool is that local government starts with these boards and commissions, right? They help inform our city council members. They help inform the city manager. They help inform the work that I do, because then we're able to see like, here are where needs are, and here's how we can meet them, or here's what we need to do to plan to meet them. And that all comes from our residents. It comes from their opinions, their voice, and that's why it's so important for them to participate.
So it's getting leaders that are already in the community involved in these boards that turn around and try to get information from residents in the town, and just kind of, it creates this like bubbling pool of people involved with each other that they might not have otherwise interacted with.
And it's this big idea of like access, right? So like access to networks. You probably have an entire network here in Greeley that I probably don't know anything about, right? And I have a network that you've never connected with. And maybe some ways our networks overlap, but in different ways, right? Maybe it's like a professional connection for you, and it might be a personal connection for me. But when you get folks who are so different working on these boards and commissions, it's a really great opportunity for them to not only learn from each other, but provide insight to their networks, so the city's reach expands, but also their reach into the city, their lean in expands as well.
It's interesting. It's been an interesting experience starting to interview people in Northern Colorado for this podcast, and I was mentioning it to my girlfriend the other day that it feels like the more interviews I do, the more I peel back this big curtain of Northern Colorado, and I start to see that a lot of people are connected and they know each other. People will spontaneously mention, "Oh, do you know such and such?" And I say, "Yeah, they're actually on the show already." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I know them and this person." And then I say, "Well, wait, I'm about to interview that person." And it's like the community is so connected in a way that I'm just now figuring out.
I think it's really fun too, right? Because like there's this like 6 degrees of separation, and in Greeley it's more like 3 degrees.
Yeah.
And it's because people get to know other people. I think that that's what's really cool about our community, is that there's this idea of care, right? Like it's a culture of care. It's not just that I know you in a professional sense. It's that I also want to know you in a personal sense. I want to have lunch with you. I want to pick your brain, which is a lot of the work that I've been doing in the last. I've been here officially a month. Is kind of sitting down with folks across the spectrum of what is Greeley, right? Like the residents of Greeley, and just kind of sitting down and saying, like, what have you seen? Where are the challenges? Where are the opportunities? What is the city doing well? What is the city not doing well? How can we connect further? And it's really kind of led to some really cool opportunities, whether that's an opportunity to hear from one of our soccer clubs, the FC Greeley, and hear from them and learn about what they're doing and how they want to grow into a semi-pro team and really utilize the city, and not utilize, but like partner with the city, right? Mm-hmm. And say, okay, now we need fields on the east side of Greeley that can match our needs, right? And so like not only is that something that the city needs to prepare for, but also something that they're really excited about. Or is it something around, fair housing? Or is it someone who's really interested in the business community? And how do we get more bilingual small business development counselors to come to our city, because many of the people who are actually opening small businesses are immigrant populations. What are these things that I'm listening to, and how am I able to like tie them in? I just came from a meeting with Talia Carroll, who's the director of the Marcus Garvey Cultural Center, and she was talking to me about how they're getting ready and they're starting to plan the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. parade in March and celebration, and how the city has been a major partner in that. And they, they always do certain things well. And I'm also like an expander, like I like to expand ideas. And I said, well, what about doing an art show as part of it as well? Because they have this beautiful African-American art and African art that they can showcase and highlight as part of the celebration. And they can utilize spaces like the Twinkton Gallery, which they didn't even know existed. Which I didn't know that the Twinkton Gallery existed until a few years ago either. So I'm learning about all these like spaces and places that I'm like, wow, that's in Greeley.
So you're connect more than just hearing out people's concerns and what they want and their vision for their role in Greeley, but you're actually connecting people live in these meetings and as you learn more and more in this role.
Well, I'm trying to. Let's say that. I'm still learning, and so it's been a really great opportunity to really kind of learn that actionable kind of person. And so being somewhat of a systems thinker, I always kind of say like, okay, this can go with this, and this kind of goes over here, and this goes this way. And I know that your listeners can't see my hands moving.
He's making lots of gyrations.
That's the way my brain thinks is, who can be part of what in order to make sure that, like, in order to make it better,
How are you keeping all this straight? So I assume you meet with more than one person a day, and they're probably, let's just say you're taking away 3 things from each meeting. How are you keeping all those in your mind when you go to the next 10 meetings and they're all saying 3 separate things? And then, do you just start to feel like this general aura of, here's a couple of the really important things I'm hearing from most folks? Or, do you find yourself taking notes and drawing diagrams and making mind maps? Or, what's this look like?
I take a lot of notes, and then I retake the notes. So I take them and then I retype them so that I can remember, what are my takeaways, what are the themes that I'm looking at, and then what are the things that I need to take action on. Another thing that I do, and it was actually something that was taught to me, this idea of calendaring. Every Friday, I try to go back 2 weeks, and then I move forward 2 weeks. And I go back the 2 weeks in order to say, okay, what did I miss in these last 2 weeks that I was supposed to get done, so that I can get that done before the end of the day. And then I move forward in saying, okay, what are the next 2 weeks going to look like, so that I'm prepared for those meetings as well.
Wow. Always looking forward, backward, and trying to stay on today. Yeah. In this first month in your role, have you found anything or kind of stumbled upon something that surprised you maybe didn't expect?
Well, I'm not sure if this is that it surprised me, but I was really excited to see how open the city is and how eager they are to provide access and opportunity to underserved populations. Not always do we, I include myself, know the right ways to do those things, but I feel like there's this interest in learning, and that really makes me excited because I come from the university. I worked at the university before, and these ideas of access, inclusion, and in some ways social justice are all part of the work that I feel like I want to do, and I feel like there's this opportunity to do those things, and on top of that there's a want for it.
Earlier you mentioned something about news updates and how you would get those out. Maybe I misinterpreted what you said. You had mentioned that part of your job is finding a way to get news updates about neighborhoods and community events out to people.
Yeah.
I feel like that's another one where I'm just baffled on where do you start? Are you working with organizations who are already doing that, or are you all trying to do that yourself? Or are you looking at committees and saying, should we delegate this to them and we think that they would be best to disseminate information? Or
So it's a little bit of all of those things. Number one, I don't know if you know this, but Greeley has an app. It's called Nextdoor.
I did not.
And it's a neighborhood app. And so it's a really great way for neighbors to actually figure out what's happening in their neighborhood and actually talk to other neighbors. So some neighbors use it to sell. Hey, I have these 5 blocks of cement or something. Are you looking for something for your I guess, garden or something like that? And at the same time, the city can also push out information. So we're going to have a straight closing on blank day or on blank week. And so people are getting that insight ahead of time. Also, news releases that go out through like the Greeley Tribune or our TV channel, which is GTV8, which is on Comcast. We do a lot of like one-on-one conversations. So like Deb DeBeauty is our neighborhood resource manager. She and I actually went door to door and were like knocking on doors and saying, hey, we're having this community meeting next week to talk about Swanson Kiwanis Park and how we can make it better for you. And we want your thoughts on how we can make it better for you, not just making that better on our own. I think the other piece of that is understanding the populations that we serve. One big thing is that there's research around Latinos and Latinx populations and how Latinx populations get most of their news through their phone, through social media on their phone. Specifically through Facebook is like the way that they get their news. And so knowing that, we can utilize social media as a way to push out information as well. And on top of that, many of our Latinx populations who are, 45 to 65 or older are also avid radio listeners. And we have several Spanish language radio stations here in our city or regional area. And so it's a great way for us to also kind of utilize that and utilize our community partners with those radio stations to get that information out as well.
Reaching the Latinx community from social media, are you like putting out things intentionally on Facebook, like Facebook pages, and then trying to get people to like that? Or what does that look like?
No, I don't think that we're creating new Facebook pages. I think that, if information is coming from the city, it should come from our city Facebook page. That way we're not like diluting a message or anything like that. But Facebook has really great ways of either targeting Spanish-speaking populations or allowing us to translate certain posts to different languages. And not just Spanish, right? Like there's I think nearly 70 languages that are spoken in our schools.
Yeah,
nearly 70%. I think it's 65% of our student population is Latinx. And so really making sure that we are connecting with all of those populations, whether they're Burmese or East African, any of the other populations that have come and are calling Greeley home.
So much. Okay, next one here. Urban renewal grants for people's homes.
Yeah.
This blew my mind, and I want to come back to it.
Yeah, so
I didn't even know this was a thing.
Yes, Greeley has an urban renewal authority, and that authority has federal grants that they can utilize to help you improve your home. And it's a specific area, right? So like Central Greeley, a little bit of East Greeley, those areas that are a little bit older that like require, in Spanish they say manita de gato, but like a touch up. And you can utilize these funds in order to help make your home look the best it possibly can.
So you just you get the word out and you say, hey, if you want it, you can apply for these grants. Do you walk people through that, or is it more just letting them know that this thing exists out there?
So, I feel like a lot of people don't even know that it exists. So the first thing is that awareness of this exists. You can apply for it. And then once they are ready to apply for it, connecting them to the right people in our city, because it can be kind of daunting, right? Connecting to the right people in the city so that they're able to apply and hopefully get that funding.
I want to ask you how you feel your previous roles in life and your social life have prepared you for this position. But before we get to that, we're going to have to cover the story that is your previous life before this last month. So where do you want to start us off? I guess I would say, are you from the northern Colorado area?
Yeah, I was actually born in Fort Collins, but we moved several times while I was growing up. So born in Fort Collins, from there moved to Torrington, Wyoming, from there moved to Scottsbluff, Nebraska, from there to Loveland. I lived in Zacatecas in Mexico. We lived in Valparaiso, Zacatecas, which is, I think, where I can attribute most of my Spanish from. We also moved from there to Las Cruces, New Mexico. We lived in Greeley. I went to kindergarten in Greeley, went back to Valparaiso, Zacatecas, came back to northern Colorado. But we always kind of, we lived in Lexington, Nebraska, but Colorado has always been kind of home, right? So Greeley, Loveland, Fort Collins have always been kind of what I feel home is, as well as Valparaiso, Zacatecas. I feel like growing up there, it was a really great opportunity to kind of understand both of the cultures that really kind of guide me and guide my life. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. So when did you come back to the area?
It was around fourth, fifth grade, we started coming back officially, and then ended up landing in Evans and went to Dos Rios Elementary. From there, went to Chapel Middle School, John Evans, and then Greeley West High School. I ended up getting my undergrad degree in social studies with secondary education, minors in Spanish and Mexican American studies from the University of Northern Colorado. Went on to CSU and got a master's in business, and recently finished the Latino Leadership Institute out of the University of Denver.
Wow, so what did you do right outside of your master's from Colorado State?
Right outside, well, while I was getting my master's, I worked as a career counselor at CSU, and then after that, I actually took about a month and traveled like Panama and Costa Rica. And then I came back and actually got a job at Ames Community College as a financial aid counselor and scholarship coordinator. And that was a really fun time as well.
Okay, and then what about after Ames?
After Ames, I was offered a job as the assistant director of alumni relations at the University of Northern Colorado, where I spent about 5.5 years. And you asked about like how did these different roles prepare me?
Yeah, we're getting there.
I think one of the things that really prepared me is this idea of moving around so much made me really comfortable with people. I'm really comfortable with connecting with folks no matter who they are. I'm a first generation college grad. My mom has been a janitor for the last 22 years. My dad has worked in construction. He's worked in a meatpacking plant. He's worked in the oil fields. He's worked in all of these different areas. And, you know, there was this idea of like, well, we don't know how to help you through college. We don't know how to do these things for you, but like we want you to do them. And so I feel like that was another piece, and they gave me a lot of grit in knowing that they were doing this hard work, and I could do it as well, right? Like I could do these kinds of things. And I think the last thing is, in my last role, I was really in charge of engaging a population of 130,000 alumni around student success, career success, and really kind of, you know, what happens after UNC. And many of those folks live along the Front Range, so it was a really great opportunity to meet with alumni who live and work in Fort Collins, Loveland, the Greeley area. We have around like 10,000 alumni who live and work here. We have nearly, I think it's like 65,000 who live between Cheyenne, Wyoming, and the Denver area. That whole Front Range is, again, what I call home, and at the same time, a really great place to meet professionals.
I want to go back to, I feel like there are some good stories here where your parents, they inspired you and they gave you grit, and they said, Chris, we don't really know how to help you in college, but we're here for you. You know, do you want to go back to that and what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, I mean, my dad is from Zacatecas. He made it to the 6th grade before coming to the United States. And so for him, this idea of education was this idea that I don't have to work as hard, right? Like I don't have to work as hard in order to, you know, provide for my future family, for all of those kinds of things. My mom was the only person in her family to graduate from high school. And she was the first in her family to graduate from high school. And so this idea that at least graduating from high school would provide you an opportunity, right? On top of that, I think that that's kind of made me more humble in the fact that this idea of humility is about like not having an ego. And I don't have an ego to say that about where I came from, because I know that I came from strong people, and that's what matters. And I came from real people, and that's what matters. And I know that where I'm going, I want to continue being a real person. And so whether you're a CEO or you're a janitor or you're a construction laborer, you have insight and you have an opinion. And I want to learn that, especially in my role at the city, because what happens in the city impacts you.
Do you feel like people struggle with this when they get a certain level of education, or they rise through the ranks of life and they get to a point? I'm not saying you or I specifically, but just people in general. Do you think this is like we struggle with this sense of, I don't want to say like forgetting where we came from, but just adapting to change, maybe to an environment that we don't know the rule book for. You know, like the imposter syndrome. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
I definitely feel that in graduate school almost every day.
I feel like people can, but I feel like the more you know who you are, the less you can, the less you're impacted with that. One big thing is that I know that there are a lot of spaces where I am the only Latino in there. I know there are a lot of spaces where I may be the only person providing that perspective. And I try to share, again, like I'm not providing a Latino perspective. I'm providing Chris's perspective as a Latino in the city. I feel like there are opportunities for you to kind of lose yourself or feel like, should I be at this gala? Is this a space for me? Does this office feel like a place where I'm supposed to be? But I feel like I know myself enough that I don't feel those things, because I really try hard to own who I am and also own what I've done, right? So like, I know that it hasn't been easy for me. I worked 3 jobs in my undergrad in order to not have loans. I cleaned Windsor High School as an undergrad. I worked at First Bank, and I worked at the Cesar Chavez Cultural Center. But for me, it was less about, do I belong in these spaces, and more about like owning myself in those spaces. Mm-hmm. And so I know that, like, even in my current position, there was someone here before me, and the work that they did was as powerful as the work that I want to do. And at the same time, I own myself enough to say, I'm going to put my own stamp on this.
Mm. Yeah, and you had mentioned that you want to bring your experience from both cultures. And I kind of want to get what you meant exactly by both cultures, just to easily identify for the listener. But how do you feel like that has impacted you from day one in this new role?
Well, I think that one thing is, coming from an underserved population, you can see that my skin is a little bit, like darker than yours. Like I've seen and experienced racism. I've seen and experienced prejudice. My dad, when he told one of his coworkers that I was working at the city, they said, well, is he cleaning toilets there? And for me, that doesn't impact me. I don't let that, like, I brush it off. And the reason why I brush it off is not because I feel above it. It's because that doesn't matter, right? Like, it doesn't matter to me that people are saying those things, because I still have a job to do. I still have work to do, and I have a space to fill. And on top of that, I am very American. You know what I mean? Like, I was born here, I was raised here for most of my life. And so when I talk about both cultures, like, I feel like I can navigate many systems, which my mom was born here, and she can navigate so many of those systems. And so having that experience and like being several generation of Coloradoan, I really feel like I have an opportunity to support others who don't know how to navigate those systems. Mm. And so I want to utilize both, this idea of like, I am an American and I know how to utilize these systems and I know how to like navigate them. And this idea of having emigrated to Mexico, being someone who is seen as different because of the color of my skin, and still being able to say, like, there is access in these spaces and there are opportunities in these spaces, and we want your voices in these spaces, because that's what makes us better as a city.
You play a powerful role here. We thank you for that.
I try, again. I've only been here a month, so...
But hey, a month it is. So in addition to that, how do you feel like your position with the alumni relations at UNC has helped you feel ready for this new role?
One of the things that really like impacted me at UNC was the fact that there are similar networks, right? So there are similar networks between the city and the university. And at the same time, my former supervisor, her name is Lindsay Crum, I have to say thank you to her, because shout out to Lindsay. She really did a lot of good work in supporting me in my own growth. So she gave me the opportunity to do the Latino Leadership Institute, which was a 12-month program where I went to Denver to learn about different aspects of leadership, whether that was neuro leadership or professional presence, this idea of like on-camera intent versus impact when you're speaking, all of those kinds of things. And also gave me the opportunity to take class. I mean, UNC, as a UNC employee, you have opportunities to take coursework, but really giving me the space to take that coursework and allowing me to learn about content management, communications, graphic design. I was able to take classes in all of those areas, which I feel like really prepared me to be the best, community engagement specialist I can be, because I know about content management, I know about social media. I can design something really quickly, even though it's not going to look as amazing as many of our designers, but it's a really easy way for me to put those things together. And then also just relationship stewardship. As a steward of the university and as a steward of the city, it's really important for me to be authentic. It's really important for me to have an open mind, to follow up on my commitments, because people don't just see me as me, they see me as, as the city. They see me as this person who represents the city. I also bring that from my culture, because in Mexico, it's more of a collective culture than it is in the United States. So I always represent more than myself. I represent my family. And I feel like that's done me well in the United States, in the fact that I always put the work first, not myself first. Whether I leave or, someone else takes the job, no matter what, like, people will know that that's a relationship that they can continue with the city or previously with the university, because it wasn't about, I like Chris. It was the work that Chris is doing on behalf of the university is something that I'm passionate about. Let me get involved.
Yeah. Before this role, what would you say is one or two of your favorite things about the Northern Colorado area?
All of our open spaces. I love to hike. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. I love Horsetooth Reservoir. Arthur's Rock is actually my favorite, just like easy hike to just go around and do stuff and just kind of like spend some time outside of like technology and, people.
Screens.
Yeah, exactly. Like all the congestion that can be like regular life. And then this idea that I call this place home. You know what I mean? Like that's the other piece, is that so many people call this place home. And I think specifically Greeley, there's so many small families here. There's so many generations of people that really feel like this is their home. It feels really comfortable, and it's a place where you just want to kind of build and grow.
Mm. Yeah, I will say, when I first moved here, it was lonely and isolating feeling. Having moved from Dallas, it was a smaller town than I was used to, and I didn't know a single soul, But I quickly got a group of friends. I quickly started getting plugged into the community. The first year I was a school bus driver, so I met a ton of people in the school district. And now, being here 4 years, when I go out and about, if I spend more than probably an hour doing stuff in town, I'm more than likely going to run into someone I know. Maybe we don't stop and talk, but we definitely, if I might see them and I think, oh, they're from such and such. And I like that feeling, because Greeley's over 100,000 people. A lot of people don't know that. Yeah. And I like towns that don't feel small, but they are. And I consider Greeley in that category.
I would agree with you. It's funny because I'll be walking, like to the store, or I'll be walking down the street, and it's like, oh, hey, that's a person from the district, or this person is from this area, or this person's from this. And so it's fun to like, I guess it's fun to get to know folks. And that's why I think that this is a good job for me as well, because I feel like I'm getting to know people, and I'm getting to know them on behalf of the city, and with the support of the city, really kind of connecting people to the resources, to the programs, to the different opportunities where they can either share their voice or participate.
Have you found yourself making connections for people off the clock? You just happen to see them outside at King Soopers or whatever. Hey, oh my gosh, I was just talking to so-and-so. You got to do this.
Yes, all the time. And it's fun. And at the same time, I sometimes have to like shut it off because like I said earlier, I'm like one of those systems thinkers. And so I think about like, this can go here. This person goes with this person. Or here's how we can connect to make this better. And sometimes I just have to shut it off and say, like, I'm at home, or I want to cook dinner, or I'm with my family right now.
Right. Yeah. And just, hello, how you doing?
Yes.
And we're going to keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some things that you are looking forward to?
I'm actually really excited about the census. I think that it'll be a really great opportunity to connect with so many different populations that live here in our city and so many different people. I think it's also an opportunity to see where the city has networks and where the city doesn't have networks, and how we can like grow into those spaces. Because I feel like a lot of times, even myself, I'm like, oh, we're doing really good. And then it's like this entire new population that you didn't even know existed comes out of the woodwork, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, why haven't we been listening to you? And so I feel like it'll be a really great opportunity for us to not only see what we're doing well, but also where we can grow. I think another thing that I'm really excited about is just challenge. I like challenge. I like the opportunity to like try new things and different things, and I feel like there's space for that here at the city. And I'm excited to get to know more folks like you. I mean, where can we connect? Where can we do things together? And where can we continue building this area that we call Northern Colorado and many of us call home?
In some level, at some piece, you and I have similar missions where I would like this podcast to unite people of Northern Colorado and not just listen and say, oh man, I really like that episode. I want them to have binged like 20 episodes and then they step away from their headphones and they feel like maybe just a little bit that they know the place they call home just a little better. Or they listen to an episode from a brewery or someone like you, and then they meet you, or they reach out to you and say, hey, I'd like to get involved, or they go into a restaurant of someone who's been on the show and they get to meet that person, or maybe they just see them over there at the kitchen and they're like, oh my gosh, I heard them on a podcast. Like, did you know this crazy story about their aunt and blah, blah, blah? And it's like, I want to create that. And, that's really the driving force behind the show. And when you first told me about what you do in your position when we first met, I thought, that's so interesting because you have like an official title that, I mean, obviously in a month you've done more than this podcast may ever achieve, but they have the same mission that we want to create connections and make home better for everyone.
And what I think is really cool about your podcast is actually that it's content that stays, right? So like, no matter how the city changes, no matter how the city grows, no matter how many new businesses come, you continue to tell the story of Northern Colorado. And I think that that's really neat because it's kind of like a little bit of a dialogue, right? It's this opportunity to get to know people in a certain space, in a certain time, and like see where they were. And then maybe in 10 years, you'll be like, whoa, that person does this now.
Yeah, and it creates these experiences. Like, I would never be sitting here in your office having this conversation otherwise.
And we met through, like, Instagram.
We did. You are like, it's funny, of the last, I think, 6 episodes, 4 or 5 of them are from Instagram. And in fact, the majority of the ones coming up in the next 2 weeks are from Instagram as well. All of a sudden, it just boom, boom, boom. People start flying off the handle from social media. And it's been a welcome presence.
That's cool.
Yeah. You had mentioned that you are excited for challenges. Does anything pop off your brain here for 1 or 2 big challenges you've been starting to look at? You see the summit of the challenge, and you're strapping on your boots, and you're getting ready to start climbing.
One big challenge is, and I see it more of like an opportunity, is the census. I think that like really kind of figuring out how to connect with so many different people. And, the city staff is small, in order for us to do that. So how do we utilize content? How do we connect with people one-on-one? How do we access certain networks? How do we use boards and commissions that are already in existence, like our Human Relations Commission? Our Human Relations Commission, their mission is to connect with people of, different backgrounds and identities and help bring them in and provide access to them through the city. And so, like, how do we utilize these different opportunities and these different networks that we already have and utilize them effectively so that we're creating better pathways, right? You talked about the power of social media. How are we utilizing social media effectively to get people excited and wanting to fill out the census? How are we utilizing social media to get people excited about boards and commissions? I mean, I was just thinking today, and I was thinking about LinkedIn's new like video. They have like a new video content streaming like idea that they want to show a lot more video. And so why not talk about the impact that a commissioner can have or someone on one of our boards through quick videos, right? Why not talk about the impact someone else can have by saying like, hey, these are the openings, and utilizing video in that way rather than a post that somebody can like scroll past and not even pay attention to. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's many ways that we can do these things, but I think that's one of the big challenges that I'm excited about. I think one of the big challenges that I'm excited about as well is that we started, I believe last year, this diversity and inclusion series, and really kind of growing that to think about diversity, whether that's diversity of thought, whether that's diversity of ethnicity, racial background, gender identity, differently abledness. All of those different things are all important, and all like deserve a space at this table of what diversity is, right? And how do you talk about those things in a way that it's not just about awareness, but it goes beyond that to understanding. It goes beyond that to action, right? Like, how do we work across difference? How do we see that we have more in common than we do probably different from ourselves, right? And so that's one of the big challenges that I'm also really excited about.
Whoa, loaded plate. Heck yeah. So not just raising awareness of all these different topics, but also bringing people together in an organic, lasting way. You know, I feel like so many people can have a conversation in a classroom about diversity, certain topics, all the topics that you mentioned, and then they walk out and it kind of stops in the classroom. You know, it kind of stays in that academic space. So I imagine one of your challenges will be how do I connect people of the community who may view themselves as different from one another in a way that's true, lasting, and then, you know, building neighbors.
And organic, right? Like, it's like we talked about it here, but we continued the conversation afterwards because, right? And I think that a big part of that has to do with access to the city. Claudia Bolt is a presenter that I recently connected with. I believe she works with Visa. And she said something that was really powerful to me. She said, diversity is who we invite to the party. Inclusion is how we treat them once they get there. And so for me, that idea has transformed into, we say, like, come to the city, participate, get involved. And when people get here, what are we doing to keep them here? How are we stewarding those relationships? How are we growing those relationships? How are we building on those things? And for me, that's that inclusion piece, right? So, like, how do people feel that they have access to the city? How are we bringing them in? And how are we continuing to grow that relationship with them?
So diversity is who we invite to the party, and inclusion is how we treat them once they're there.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. And sitting here at time, Chris Garcia, if you were to leave our listeners with one or two messages about yourself or the City of Greeley or what it's like to be the community engagement specialist of such a town, what would you say to the folks out there?
Well, I just want to say, get involved. I think that there's so many opportunities for people to share their voice, to participate, to really kind of provide that action of being involved with the city. I would love for folks to come and maybe we can get coffee, or maybe they want to pick my brain about how their involvement best suits themselves as well as the city. I invite you to come and hang out with me.
And how could people reach you if that's the case?
Yeah, my email here at the city is chris.garcia@greeleygov.com, or you can give me a call at 970-336-4288. I'm still remembering those things. But those are my email and phone number, and I welcome any opportunity to connect with residents.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for your time.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Do you have an idea or input about a possible future guest on the show? Reach out to us at themoreyouKnoco@gmail.com, or just private message us on our Instagram page. As always, I want to shout out Russell Isaac Long for all the wonderful music used here at The More You Know Co. Are you looking for a little bit of bonus content in addition to the regular episodes on the show? Look for us out there on the interwebs on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at The More You Know Co. Until next time, peace!